A prestigious medical journal just claimed fast food and wine make you live longer, while salmon and veggies might shorten your life. Sounds a little crazy, right? Well, let's uncover the truth of what they're not telling you. Hey everyone, my name's Marc Bates. I'm a metabolic health coach. This is part of my Looking at the Research series, and this is the study that broke nutrition science. Why fast food won't save your brain. Okay, let's get into this. This is the study we're talking about. Okay, it's from Nature Medicine, and it's called Optimal Dietary Patterns for Healthy Aging. And we're not going to get too much into it because what happens is there's just a quirk in this particular study where what it said in the data is that fast food and fried foods were better for you than potentially salmon and veggies, right? And it's like everyone kind of that makes no sense. So we're going to look into this. So let's get into what happened here on this study. So we're going to call this the study that broke nutrition science, right? So after following 105,000 patients for participants for 30 years, researchers discovered something that challenged everything we thought we knew about healthy eating. Fast food, fried food, and wine were associated with better chances of brain health and longer life, while traditional healthy foods showed unexpected negative associations. The founding sounds absurd, and it really is. It contradicts decades of metabolic research showing that processed foods drive inflammation, insulin resistance, and chronic disease. Yet there it sits in one of the world's most prestigious medical journals. So what happened? Well, there's a biological reality behind these numbers. So to understand why this finding defies biological plausibility, we need to examine what actually happens when someone consumes fast food. Metabolic endotoxemia represents one of the most well-documented pathways linking processed food consumption to systematic inflammation. When individuals consume Western-style diets rich in processed foods, bacterial endotoxins breach the gut barrier and enter the bloodstream. The research on this mechanism is unambiguous. Controlled studies demonstrate that placing healthy subjects on a Western-style diet for just 1 month triggers a 71% increase in plasma endotoxin activity levels, while prudent-style diet reduces levels by 31%. This endotoxin translocation activates inflammatory cascades throughout the body, right? LPS molecules bind to toll-like receptor 4, initiating the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines and establishing the low-grade systematic inflammation that underlies most chronic diseases. The biological pathway is clear. Processed foods compromise gut integrity, facilitate endotoxin absorption, stimulate inflammatory responses, and contribute to insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. Fast food consumption literally triggers a state of low-grade sepsis every time someone eats it. So what happened? Well, we have a crisis in nutritional epidemiology. How can this study produce findings that directly contradict established biological mechanisms? The answer lies in the fundamental limitations of nutritional epidemiology itself. Most large-scale nutrition studies, including this Nature Medicine research, rely on food frequency questionnaires, FFQs, to assess dietary intake. These instruments ask participants to recall what they ate weeks, months, or even years in the past. The reliability problems are severe. Even Walter Willett, developer of the Harvard FFQ, estimates correlations of only 0.6 to 0.7 between standard FFQs and actual dietary intake. That's a pretty poor level of correlation. Some researchers argue these memory-based methods are so flawed they should be considered inadmissible for scientific research. I tend to agree with that concept. But the problems extend beyond measurement error. Observational studies cannot control for the complex web of lifestyle factors that cluster with dietary choices, what we call confounding variables. People who frequently eat fast food may also be more socially connected, have higher incomes, or possess other characteristics that independently influence health outcomes. The study authors themselves acknowledge this limitation, suggesting that the positive association between fast food and healthy aging might reflect social aspects of eating away from home rather than the food itself. So, when statistics contradict biology? The Nature Medicine study exemplifies a broader crisis in nutritional science. The field has become dominated by large observational cohorts that prioritize statistical power over mechanistic understanding. Prestigious journals favor these studies because they appear impressive. Enormous sample sizes, decades of follow-up, and sophisticated statistical analysis create an aura of scientific authority. Yet they lack the mechanistic anchors needed to distinguish correlation from causation. The peer review process compounds the problem. Epidemiologists and statisticians evaluate these papers based on methodological rigor within their field, not biological plausibility. If the statistics are sound and the sample size large, the study gets published regardless of whether the findings make any biological sense. This creates a feedback loop where counterintuitive results become features rather than bugs. Paradoxical findings generate headlines, drive citations, and elevate journal visibility. The incentive structure rewards novelty over truth. So what we have is a problem. We need to have a framework for navigating contradictory research. Practitioners and policymakers face a practical dilemma. They must make decisions based on published research, yet that research often contradicts basic biological principles. The solution requires a hierarchical approach to evidence evaluation. Mechanistic studies that measure biomarkers and physiological responses should carry more weight than observational correlations. Randomized controlled trials, especially those conducted in metabolic ward settings, provide more reliable evidence than self-reported dietary surveys. Evolutionary biology offers another filter for plausibility. Humans evolved consuming whole foods from animal and plant sources. When modern studies suggest that highly processed industrial foods promote longevity, the findings likely reflect methodological artifacts rather than biological truth. Clinical outcomes provide the ultimate reality check. If dietary interventions consistently improve metabolic markers and reverse chronic diseases in practice, those results matter more than statistical associations in population studies. Biology operates through mechanisms, not correlations. So, we're going to make a case here for systematic reform. The current system of nutritional research requires fundamental restructuring. Future studies must integrate biomarker measurements with dietary assessments. Instead of asking what people ate, researchers need to measure what those foods did to their biology. Inflammatory markers, insulin responses, metabolomics profiles, and gut permeability assessments would anchor correlations in cellular reality. Shorter mechanistic trials should inform longer observational studies. Rather than relying solely on decades-long cohorts, the field needs iterative research programs that combine controlled interventions with population-level tracking. Guidelines and recommendations should explicitly distinguish between mechanistic evidence and epidemiological associations. Policymakers should acknowledge that recommendations that rest on observational data alone rather than proven biological mechanisms are probably flawed. The field must evolve from counting what people say they eat to measuring what food does to the human physiology. There's some real-world implications. The stakes extend far beyond academic debates. Dietary guidelines built on flawed epidemiological foundations have real consequences for public health. So consider the trajectory of metabolic health over the past 4 decades. Despite following epidemiologically driven recommendations emphasizing low-fat, grain-based diets, rates of obesity, diabetes, and metabolic syndrome have skyrocketed. The The disconnect between guidelines and outcomes suggests fundamental problems with the evidence base. Meanwhile, clinical interventions based on biological mechanisms consistently produce superior results. Ketogenic diets reverse type 2 diabetes. Carnivore protocols resolve inflammatory conditions. These approaches work because they align with human metabolic physiology rather than statistical correlations. The Nature Medicine study represents a perfect case study in why practitioners must prioritize biological plausibility over prestigious publications. There is a path forward. Nutritional science stands at a crossroads. It can continue privileging large observational studies that generate paradoxical findings, or it can embrace a mechanistically grounded approach that integrates cellular biology with population health. The choice will determine whether future dietary recommendations help or harm public health. Bodies operate according to biological principles, not statistical associations. When research suggests that fast food promotes longevity while fish causes harm, the most likely explanation involves methodological limitations rather than overturned biology. Practitioners who understand this distinction can navigate contradictory research by asking the right questions. Does the finding align with established mechanisms? Were biomarkers measured? Do the results replicate across different study types? The framework provides a compass for evidence-based research practice in an era of conflicting information. Ultimately, the future of nutritional science depends on recognizing a fundamental truth. Correlation is not causation, and prestigious publication does not guarantee biological accuracy. The field must measure what food does to human biology rather than simply counting what people claim to have eaten. Okay, with that, I want to thank you for watching. If you have questions about this or concerns, leave it in the comments section. Let me know what you think here. Because a lot of what you're seeing coming up, where people are saying this study proves that you should do this study proves you should do that, are flawed. They're intimately flawed. Okay, so let me know what you're thinking. We are building a community here. Let me know if this helped and if there's something else you'd like me to cover and what that is. Thank you very much. And as always, if you haven't done so, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this with a friend. It helps the channel, and I thank you for that, and it will help a lot of other people. So have a great day. Thank you.